Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. My name is Sky Corkin. I'm the Communication and Engagement Coordinator with SRNA, and welcome to our first ever Rare Roundtable. Today is Rare Disease Day, a globally recognized day for those within the rare disease community, and we're really excited to be kicking it off with this very special event, so thank you for joining us. We have three special guests with us today. Kris, Alan, who will hopefully be joining us in just a little bit, and then Cyrena. Aldeli, unfortunately, couldn't make it today. But our guests will be discussing their own personal rare experiences and sharing how they've embraced new normals after their diagnosis. If you do have any questions for our guests, you can put them in the comments section. We'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of the event. But if anything comes to you during the conversation, please feel free to put it there. So I will let Kris introduce himself in just a minute. But first, I wanted to give a warm introduction to our moderator for today's discussion. Everybody, please welcome SRNA volunteer and Peer Connect leader Cyrena Gawuga.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the SRNA Rare Roundtable. I'm really excited to be moderating this discussion, and Alan should be with us soon, but for respect for your time, and I'm sure a lot of people are really ready to hear what our patients have to say, we'll just jump right into this. First, I think of course, it's important for me to share how I'm part of this community. So I have a diagnosis of transverse myelitis, and I actually just had my anniversary. My first event was in February 2014, and at that time reached out to what was then the Transverse Myelitis Association, and I really valued the resources and the personal contact. I think a lot of people know that because these are rare neuroimmune diseases, it's not uncommon not to know anyone else, and it's a very difficult position to be in. So I'm very happy to be able to help SRNA in any way I can and really connect the rare neuroimmune disease community. So I'd like Kris to just introduce himself and talk about how he's part of the community.
So, hello everybody. My name is Kris Wilkes. I'm originally from Indiana. As you can see, the jerseys in the back. I played basketball, went to UCLA for college, and I got diagnosed with ADEM. It's acute. I got the propped up right here. Disseminated encephalomyelitis. So basically, the myelin in your spine and in the back of your brain, there's a coat over it called myelin. And when you have ADEM, your body basically attacks the myelin and it basically just gets rid of the electrical nerves in your body. So I was paralyzed from the waist down in 2019. And from there, I've gained the ability to walk again. I've gained my strength back. And I'm definitely in a lot happier place than I was when that happened. But yeah, that's a little short and sweet.
So Kris, can you share perhaps a little bit more? Can you share more about how your life has changed since your diagnosis in 2019? Where were you before and after?
Yeah, so in high school, I was Mr. Basketball in Indiana. I was McDonald's All-American. Coming out, I had over like 30 Division I scholarships to go play basketball. Ultimately, I chose UCLA. We were the #1 recruiting class. My first year, I was the second leading scorer. Second year, I was the first. Scored 1,000 career points, and I was projected to go into the NBA draft in 2019. At the beginning of the year, I was projected top 10, and then towards the end, we lost a lot of games, but I was still projected to get drafted. And on the day of the draft, which is so ironic, on the day of the draft to get drafted, I woke up paralyzed, and for me, it was definitely it was definitely like, changing. I've had a dream that I was, going to go play in the NBA and accomplish my dreams. Then the day of, to go reach those dreams, to wake up paralyzed is
Mhm.
definitely a shatter.
Just just just
Yeah,
a little bit jarring to
yeah,
your
yeah.
life plans, right? So did you feel like, you know, you have this you're paralyzed now.
Mhm.
Your career, you see your career as like just completely, I would imagine. I know from my experience, it felt like your whole world has kind of been blown up because you don't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
But you start to have to live with the condition that you're in. Do you feel like at that time you were capable of foreseeing a new normal experience for yourself? I mean, it's a
Uh,
big shift.
yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I just really didn't know what was going to happen next. When it first happened, nobody really knew. Like, I guess for ADEM, there's really only two places. There's a place in Cleveland, and there's the Mayo Clinic in Arizona that specialize in those type of diseases. And when I was in Indiana at the time when it happened, and when
Mhm,
it happened, nobody really knew really what it was. They might have thought it was MS or just something different. So just
right.
having all those different doctors coming in and seeing me and not really knowing what my future holds if I'll ever be able to walk again. It was definitely a scary moment.
No, I can definitely understand that. You said that you were, I had transverse myelitis, you had ADEM, but we both kind of were, suddenly paralyzed. I
Yeah.
think, and it's a very disconcerting experience. And I was paralyzed on one side.
Mm,
So that was something too that a lot of people, I was in the hospital and the same thing, saw lots of doctors, all these teams coming at me, and no one could, for a long time, no one could tell me exactly what happened. I got different, like, oh, you had a stroke, or maybe this is MS. There's so many different things flying at you. But at the end of the day, like for me, one of my big goals was I need to walk again.
yeah.
And I think for quite a few people will probably have a similar type of thought process. The first thing is like, I need to be moving again.
Yeah.
And, the idea of trying to figure out what normal is going to be after that is a really difficult proposition. Perhaps you can tell us a little bit more about, what happened to you afterward. Like, what did you start
Yeah.
to see for your future now that maybe the MBA wasn't
Yeah.
in sights?
So yeah, I mean, like you say, the first thing is, how am I going to walk again? Am I going to be able to walk again? So, we went through a couple of treatments with steroids and then the
Mhm,
plasmapheresis. Those things started to get my feeling back a little bit over time. But I remember coming out and they told me, you're going to be in a wheelchair for a while. And I don't know, for me, like when people tell me that something's going to happen, especially a negative thing, it always makes me strive to, go beyond that and make sure I do that. So for me, they told me I'll be in it for a month. I was in the wheelchair for like 3 days, and then I upgraded to the walker. And lucky for me, I still have my strength in my arms to be able to like move myself
mhm,
around. But yeah, just being on the walker for a few months, and then after a few months being able to actually start taking my first steps,
mhm,
that was just it was amazing. And then just from there, just continuing to be able to walk, and then still finding some way to still, I guess, give back to basketball was
mhm.
for me. Now that basketball was kind of over, and they told me that this was, something that I probably won't be able to do again. I had to kind of, I guess, start thinking of something else to give back.
Mhm. So how do you give back to basketball now?
Yeah. So for me, I started a sports equipment company. We started as like training basketball. It basically helps with the rotation of a person's jump. So I kind of dedicated myself into a different path, more of the
Yeah.
business and being in it that way. So that was really kept me going.
Yeah, I think it's really important to find a way to motivate yourself.
Yeah.
I know I had a very similar sort of experience, like, when I did you were you inpatient rehabilitation?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay,
I
yeah,
had to
yeah.
rehab for a few months after, just doing it's crazy doing simple stuff like leg
Mhm,
raises.
mhm.
Stuff you would never even think about. I would definitely say now I definitely appreciate my legs a lot more than I did before.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's really important to have something that motivates you, and I think
Yeah.
you talked about them telling you, "Oh, you're gonna be in a wheelchair for a certain amount of time." I had that same sort of thought. They're like, "Oh, you're going to be in a wheelchair, and then you'll have to, you'll go home on a walker." And I thought to myself,
Mhm,
"That's not gonna happen. I'm not gonna do that." And I recall getting to inpatient rehab the first day, and they made me
mhm.
get up and walk, and I was just I I actually walked. It was with a lot of support, but, you know, I
That's a
think
big
that
step though.
it's a big yeah, exactly, and, when I left on a cane, and they're like, "We've never had anyone come in the way, where you were and leave on a cane," and it's just I still use a cane, and that was something that became part of my new normal. I know a lot of people often think about, well, residual symptoms, like what happens after
Yeah,
your diagnosis. Do you have pain? Do you have difficulty walking?
yeah.
Bladder, bowel issues. There are a lot of things that happen when you have, damage to your neurological system.
Mhm.
And I think there's a real range of outcomes that people have.
Oh, yeah.
So how do you have any residual problems from your
Yeah, 100%. I guess mine has came more from my bladder. Definitely have had still stuff with bladder, that happened back in 2019.
yeah.
And then, I guess would say, like, sensitivity in my foot, not being able to feel certain stuff or
Mhm,
certain,
mhm.
feelings and stuff has definitely been a big thing.
How do you manage that?
I guess for me, I manage it by just getting back. I mean, like you say with your cane, like, I guess it's just my new normal now. It's something I don't really think too much about because 'cause I've been doing it for so long, and
Yeah,
I'm kinda just managing.
yeah, yeah. I think for me, I have residual issues. I mean, I mentioned
Mhm.
the cane because I still have weakness in my left leg from the paralysis and a bit of a foot drop. So I use the cane to make sure I don't fall on my face on a regular basis. But I think a lot of people have neuropathic pain that happens
Mm.
after they have a rare neuroimmune incident, and I have had neuropathic pain ever since my first incident in 2014. So I've actually had 3 episodes of transverse myelitis. I'm very
Mm.
lucky.
I'm glad, yeah,
But,
I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm glad
no,
you're still
I
fighting,
you have to laugh about it, right?
Yeah, no, but it's still
Yeah.
amazing that you're still here and that you're here to still talk to people and, you
Yeah,
know
I think I think that's something that's been valuable too, is I think a lot of people don't get enough information about what can happen afterward. And
Mhm.
pain management is really important and very challenging. And I will say for me, I've been very fortunate to work with a neuroimmunologist who just sees people who have neuroimmune disorders. So he works mostly with multiple sclerosis, but because there is some similarity, I'm one of his patients. And I know that people have mixed experiences with gabapentin, but
Oh, yeah.
I found it very helpful for me.
Mhm.
I I definitely know when I forgot to take it. I'll
Yeah,
just
yeah, you definitely for sure. I think the hardest part about the gabapentin was trying to wean yourself off of it.
Mhm.
Uh,
No, well, I still take it. It's just
okay.
I'm stuck
Yeah,
on it.
yeah.
But we're all in different places, right?
Yeah,
That's
100%.
I think the other thing that I've noticed, and I'm sure there must be other people who have this as well, is temperature issues.
Mm.
Um, my doctor calls it just I asked about this. He said it's autonomic. I have cold, my left foot is extremely cold. We don't
Mhm.
know why. It's something, again, that's part of my new normal. Like, I used to not sleep in socks. I have to sleep in socks now. I hate it, but I do it. You
Yeah.
know? It's I think that there's all these little things that come along with a rare neuroimmune disorder
Mhm.
that it's hard to, there's not like one doctor you see for all of the things that come up,
Right.
and it's hard to figure it out. And because, we are a community with different disorders that can have different effects on the parts of our body,
Yeah.
you know, I'm sure we have lots of questions that, again, maybe is show why it's really important to keep engaged with each other.
Yeah.
Do you deal with pain at all?
Not I wouldn't no, not I guess not pain.
Mhm.
Nothing that hurts. I mean, I guess one thing I will say though that I've learned is that a lot of times when you have one autoimmune disorder, it kind of morphins to another. So
Mhm.
for me, I had Crohn's disease first.
Ah, that's very interesting. I had lupus first.
Okay. Yeah. So I've had Crohn's, and it's weird. It's nobody else in my family has Crohn's or anything, any autoimmune.
Mhm.
But I developed Crohn's first, and that's kind of that next thing was ADEM. That's what I got after
Mhm.
that. So
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing too, is that I think this idea of like having multiple disorders happening at
yeah.
the same time. And I remember it ultimately took a while for them to nail down that it was transverse myelitis,
Mhm.
because the lupus sort of got in the way of people trying to diagnose things. I think it kind of clouded the waters. But I think that probably a lot of people have this issue where they have to negotiate with many different specialties before they figure out what happened to them.
Yeah.
Perhaps some people have to see many doctors and over a course of a few years, especially if it's not something that happens, suddenly, like
Right.
mine or yours did. But some people have like this really like long progressive,
Well, I will tell you, it did. I skipped over a little info. Like it did. It built up a little bit. It was.
Okay, okay.
It was. So the week before, I try not to go too much in depth, but the
No,
weekend
you
before,
can. Go ahead, please,
yeah,
please.
yeah. So the draft was on a Friday. It was on the 20th of June. So it was on a Friday, and I had a workout in San Antonio about a week before. So maybe like Friday of the last week, I had a workout there. And when I flew out there to work out, the morning I woke up to work out, I was really sick. Like I felt really,
Mhm,
really sick. And I worked out the whole entire workout. It was okay, but I felt sick the entire time. Afterwards, they took my temperature. I had like 103-degree fever.
oh,
So they took me over to the hospital right next door, and they told me I had strep throat.
mm,
So I couldn't finish any more workouts. I had to go home. So they sent me home. I got a flight, went home. So a few days after being home, I started getting real bad back pain where my back was just hurting.
yeah, yeah,
I didn't know
mhm,
what it was, but it kept progressing. And so the day before the draft, or 2 days before the draft, I had to use the restroom when I woke up in the morning, but I hadn't used the restroom the whole day, but my back was killing me really, really bad. So I went to like a clinic first, and they were like, "Hey, did you use the restroom today?" And I was like, "No." So
mhm,
they told me I need to go to the ER because you haven't used the restroom today. We can't really do anything about that. So I went to the ER. I still couldn't go, and I still had back pain. So they gave me
mhm.
morphine,
Yep,
and
yep.
it's crazy when they gave me the morphine, I still had pain.
Mhm,
I still
mhm.
felt it through it. So, they gave me some more medication, and then they put a catheter in me
Okay.
to drain my bladder. And then they left the catheter in and said, "Hey, come back in 2 days. We'll take the catheter out and see where you are then." And
Mhm,
so, I went home. hung out with my friends because I had to rent a big Airbnb because it's for the NBA draft. You know,
Yeah, of course.
So I remember the day before the draft, I had woke up that morning, I dumped my bag out, and when I had bent over, I couldn't stand back up. And so I had called one of my friends. They came in and they just helped me stand up, and it was weird. I didn't think too much about it because it was the
Yeah.
first time it happened. Like whatever. So I go sit down on the couch. For some reason, I sat there all day because we were just hanging out. So nighttime came about 8 or 9 p.m. One of my friends is like, "Yo, we're going to the gas station. Do you want to come?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Mhm.
I go to try to stand up
Yep.
and I couldn't stand up, and it felt like my legs were like asleep. And I was like,
Mhm.
huh, like
Mhm.
I don't know. I couldn't do anything. So I'm like, hey man, y'all gotta just take me to the room. Like something's going on. That's when they took me to the room, and that's when I woke up the next morning and I couldn't feel anything. You know, that was
Oh,
so
wow.
it definitely it
Yeah.
progressed. It progressed a little slow, but it definitely did progress. So
Oh, yeah, that's very different from mine. Mine was a course of hours. Like same
wow.
thing, I had the back pain. And
Yeah.
then, a couple hours, like my legs started to go, then my arms started to go. And the next thing I knew, I couldn't walk. And it was, yeah, it was very shocking. Oh, we have a question here. So we have
Oh yeah.
a group of medical students from the NYIT College of Osteopathic Medicine. So they have a question, and I think both of us can answer this, but maybe you can
Mhm.
go first, Chris. What's one piece of advice you have for young doctors you've learned from your own physician-patient relationships? So what would you
Mm.
tell some med students?
I guess you talk just when they talk to patients and relationships with the patients. I would say more so. I guess just being encouraging, just always keeping a smile on your face, being happy because those times can be real sad. They can be real depressing. So just keeping the spirits high. I mean, I guess you have to know the person to know, what they really like. But I think overall, as a general lesson, just keeping the spirits high and always, just being good.
Yeah, I think from my experience, the most important thing is to listen to your patients, listen to what
Mm,
they're telling you about
mhm,
their personal experience. I keep using this word, but what they're going through, the symptomology that they're reporting, and
mhm,
that everything isn't textbook.
mm,
So, in med
yeah,
school, you learn like things work in a certain way, but in
right.
the real world, things don't always present like it is in your textbook. So I know, for example, I ran into the issue a couple times with transverse myelitis. People think it should be like many different segments of the spinal cord because that's
Mhm,
what they learned, but it doesn't have to be like a whole bunch. I mean, mine really was like one and a half. So it was a problem for some people for a while, and they thought, oh, this is a stroke because this looks like a stroke. But it was like the symptoms I was having were not a stroke. So, listen to the patient, be open to unique presentations. And like Chris said too, I think you should be encouraging. And I think it's really important because there is a range of disability that can
right.
happen with rare neuroimmune disorders, that you be cognizant of the fact that people can have very productive and successful lives with disabilities. I've I've personally never had a doctor who told me I can't do X, but I know people who have. And I think it's very important to not tell people they won't be able to do X.
Yeah.
Like not tell people you will not be able to walk again unless it's very clear that they won't be able to,
Mhm.
because it can be discouraging. And I think that people should have the opportunity to try, as much as possible. And so be encouraging, listen to your patients, be open to unique presentations of even rare diseases have their own, there can be rare presentation of rare diseases. So be open to that. But I don't know. That's I think where I would start is just listen to your patient and be encouraging. So, Chris, and I think
Mhm.
I'll answer this too, but again, Chris, I'll go to you first. what are positive things that have come in the wake of your diagnosis and kind of creating your new normal?
I guess the positive things I would say is being able to do things like this, being able to share my story and being able to show, like, I mean, you never give up. I mean,
Mhm,
there are going to be a lot of downs and a lot of things that happen to you in life, but you can always overcome them and
mhm,
and just keep pushing forward. I guess would be my thing. That's definitely, yeah.
mhm. What are like what are things that you would say that you've learned from your
Mm.
experience or, maybe new opportunities that kind of arose, other than say sharing your experience here, but other opportunities that arose in the wake of your diagnosis?
Well, like I say that before, they told me that I would never be able to play basketball again,
Mhm,
and that's always been my strongest goal is to get back on the court and play.
mhm,
And now I feel like I've worked hard the last 4 or 5 years, and I've got to a place where my body, my mind, and my spirits, everything is feeling like those days when I did play basketball again. So guess I would say that. I mean, just
mhm,
being able to set a goal for something and being able to achieve that goal and work towards that goal, especially for something like you said before, when they tell you you can't do something, for a lot of people that's, discouraging. And
mhm.
for me, I take that type of things and, I want to overcome it. So,
Yeah, yeah. I would say, what I have a similar answer in that a positive thing that's come from this is I've been able to engage with rare neuroimmune disorders community and also
mhm,
with the lupus community because, I think I remember reading a stat once that like 1% of people with lupus end up with transverse myelitis. So a
mm,
lot of people with lupus don't know this can happen. So I've had the opportunity to share my story with that. I think it changed my career path. I
mhm,
realized I didn't have the stamina to do laboratory research, so I reoriented myself and I d I ended up going to social work school, and because when it happened, I was actually in a PhD program, and I finished that, and I thought, "I can't do this career because I don't have the stamina for this. What can I do that's different and it's also still gonna contribute?" So I ended up going to social work school, and I've used my experience kind of dealing with transverse myelitis and all the symptoms I've had to really become an advocate for disability as an identity. I think that we often, don't recognize there's like what 20 to 25% of the US population is disabled.
mm,
And I think that it's really important to like show up as a disabled person who's able to be in the world working so that people recognize it's still possible. And so that's something else that I've gotten out of it is kind of like cultivating this like disabled identity and being okay with that. Oh, we have another question here. So it sounds like most of your experience have been in or near a larger city hospital. Have either of you experienced symptoms where you needed medical help in a rural community? Have you now you mentioned being in Indiana. Were
yeah.
you like in Indianapolis or something
So
like that?
I was in Indianapolis, but I think for a lot of rare autoimmune diseases or just the stuff that we went through, not everybody is equipped to deal with those kind of things. So
Right.
following back earlier, there was only two places, a place in Ohio and then the Mayo Clinic in Arizona that really
Mhm.
specialized in ADEM to be able to get you the right treatment, to do the right monitoring, to do the right, everything. Because if they
Mhm.
had seen that, when I first went, they did take a X-ray of my spine and they did all that. They looked at it, but they didn't know what they were looking for.
Right.
And if I had a place, like the Mayo Clinic or the place in Cleveland, and I went there first, it might have been a different experience. They might have been able to stop it earlier.
Mhm.
But I guess the challenges from that is just communicating with the doctor and, like you say, just telling
Mhm.
them how you feel and the different things, different areas you're feeling pain or just your different symptoms really is the best way to work those types of systems.
Yeah, so I think that this is an important observation, is that a lot of the resources to receive the best treatment for rare
Mhm,
neuroimmune disorders are near larger cities and hospital systems. So I live in Providence, Rhode Island, which, has a fairly well-built healthcare system, and I also get a lot of my specialty care in Boston.
mhm,
So, I'm very fortunate to live along that corridor that I can do that, but a lot of people do have to patch together care
yeah,
because, like you said, for example, with ADEM, there's 2 places that really specialize in it. So, I think that, when you're in a situation where whether you're in a rural community or you're just in a community that doesn't have a lot of expertise in your particular disorder, it's it is challenging, I
yeah,
will have to say, and I think probably one of the most important things that you can do as a patient in that sort of situation is to try to reach out to the SRNA. I know that they keep a directory of physicians who treat rare neuroimmune disorders, but if
mhm,
you are in a place that just doesn't have anyone who specializes in it, I think that is the most important thing, is to be as communicative as possible about what's going on with you and what your needs are, because, for physicians who may not have seen your disorder before, may not have, experience in kind of like the trajectory of what the symptom development, and perhaps if you do, you may have to guide them, you know. And if you, say, for example, need specialized rehabilitation services, there are resources within hospitals, and I can't speak specifically to rural hospitals because I don't know for sure, but it's always worth inquiring about social service resources in hospitals. So most hospitals will have social workers or care navigators that could be able to help you connect with care in other areas and help you connect with resources that can help you pay for it if your insurance won't pay for it. So it can
mhm,
be very complicated sometimes, unfortunately, but there is help rather through the SRNA, or if you check within the hospital, if they have some sort of social services that you can talk to help you start making those connections to, as this question here says, work the system. You know, that's kind of what social workers and care navigators do, is work the system. So that could be one place to go to if you're in a smaller community in the hospital and trying to figure out what to do. So, another question that sometimes comes up, and it is kind of like this idea of,
mhm,
I don't know, like survivor's guilt in a way. So, like we've said before, there's like a whole range of outcomes that can happen when you have a rare neuroimmune disorder. And I think we're both, you know, walking, functioning, and there are people perhaps who don't progress as far. And I will say that I've had, this moment when I was actually able to walk out of the rehab hospital thinking this could have been a lot worse, and then thinking,
mhm.
why did I get through this okay? Not too many problems. I mean, someone might look at me and say, "Well, you have a lot going on," but would think to myself, "Well, considering what could have happened,
Right.
I'm doing okay." And I think sometimes there is a little bit of maybe internal back and forth about like, "Well, why am I doing okay and other people aren't?" Do you ever feel that way?
Yeah, I mean, I've since I've been able to walk again and being able to work out and do all those things that I've could do before I got injured, being able to now be able to do that stuff now has definitely you know made me feel happy.
Mhm.
Definitely one of those things where it could have been worse. I still could be hurt. I still could not having feeling. I mean, I could be very much like you know, being able still have to use a cane or anything, and not having to do that is definitely a blessing.
Yeah, yeah, I would definitely say that, you know, I still think I'm very fortunate. And the problem is when you have a rare neuroimmune disorder is that it's so dependent. Your outcome can be very dependent on who you have access to
Mm,
and who you are able to build into your care team, you know?
mm,
For example, my neuroimmunologist and my rheumatologist work together in a hospital system, so they communicate regularly. But that's just the luck of being in an area with a lot of
yeah,
healthcare providers all in one place. A lot of people don't have that, and there is a certain level of, I don't know, privilege guilt, come medical privilege. I
'cause
don't know what you would
it
call it.
doesn't happen. Yeah, like, I
Yeah.
mean, even for me, I had 2 main doctors that I saw while I was in the hospital, but
Mhm,
and while you're in the hospital, you know, they're all hands-on, but, like, as soon as I came out, you know, it was a lot different, you know, it was
mhm,
either hard to, like, get in contact with them, or it was hard to get medical records to send it to the Mayo
mhm,
Clinic, so
mhm,
it was a lot of struggles after coming out of the hospital,
mhm.
I guess I would say for me. And even communicating with, you know, the rehab team, like, they
Yeah.
never communicated with them either, so I didn't have that, like, privilege to be able to, like, have them all like a team per se,
Mhm.
you know? So,
Yeah, yeah. So, what's your medical team like now? Like, what kind of
yeah.
providers do you see?
So now, I mean, on a regular everyday basis, I don't really see anybody now,
Okay.
as much. I used to when I was still on medication for my Crohn's, but I was able to suppress that and kinda
Oh,
change up
mhm.
my diet and stuff so I could get off that medication. For the ADEM, I was only on that, you know, the medication that you were on, the gabapentin and stuff. I was on
Mhm.
that for probably about, like, a little less than a year,
Okay.
and then I came off of that. So right now, you know, I'm off of all medication right
Oh,
now.
wow.
I'm moving good right now.
Yeah, so we have a comment here, and I think that this is something that's really important to point out to people. As much as possible, thank you, Nancy, for saying this. As much as possible, keep your records together
Yeah.
in some
Oh,
way.
yeah.
Keep a list of all of the doctors that you see, all of the medications that you take,
Mhm.
whatever diagnosis you've had, how many times you've been in the hospital, all of that stuff. And like whenever I see a new doctor, I have a document on my computer, and I actually also have this in my iPhone. But I just hand them this thing, and I'll tell you, it has sped things up. Everyone's on a computer
Yeah.
now, and so they have to enter everything. And I just give them this document. They're like, "Wow, this is amazing," because we've just swept away 30 minutes of just that, data that they can just type in, and now we can have a real discussion. And I think like you really want to make sure that you have, I guess, your history together, because there's so many times you're going to see physicians who know nothing about you and probably know very little about whatever rare neuroimmune disorder you have, even if they're neurologists. Like,
Mhm.
might not know. So you want to make sure that you're able to keep everything together, who you've seen, when you saw them, when you were in the hospital, if you know what treatments and it's important as much as possible to know what treatments you have, your medications and their dosages. It's the
Oh,
phone numbers, emails if they have them, whatever it might be, just keep it all together. It's good for your knowledge, and it also kind of facilitates care when you
yeah.
can sweep away a lot of that stuff that you have to talk about. But
I apologize for my dog. He's
oh no, that's fine. That's like I had to lock up my cat. Yeah, so I think that that's something that's really important to recognize is like keeping yourself together in terms of your medical information will can often help make treatment move along faster.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think really the new normal is just it's different for everybody. And we all end up in different places and there's no reason to feel like you failed in some way because you aren't walking or I can't run still. It's been almost 10 years, but I can't run and I like that is part of my new normal. I can run about a block and then I start like limping. That's fine. That's where I am. And, everyone has a place that becomes their new normal. Doesn't mean you don't start trying, but there are things that just change for
Yeah.
you. And I think the important thing is to recognize that your life is going to change. I think we both demonstrated that our lives have changed, some for the better, some maybe not as, you know, great, but it's your life. And oh yeah, Alan, this is exactly the same. If you can, I mean, a lot of people may not have this option, but if you can, go to one hospital. I I I go to two hospital systems, but they communicate. But that's a
Yeah.
lucky thing. I just wanted to point out that Alan said that Alan was supposed to be with us today, but we had a little technical difficulties. So yes, if you can, be in one system so everybody can communicate. But again, that's a new normal. Like if you didn't have this before, you may not have even thought about the fact that
Right.
doctors need to communicate with each other. So, yeah. Any final words, Chris?
No, I mean, it was a pleasure you guys having me. It was a pleasure being able to share my story, give some feedback, and answer some questions.
Yeah, it was really nice to meet you.
You as well.
It's so great to really just be able to meet other people in the rare neuroimmune disorders community. I literally the first time I met people is when I went to RNDS last year. Yeah, I think it's important for everyone to know that there is support. The SRNA
Mhm.
is here. We have a peer connect leaders who are people that you can reach out to through SRNA who are people like myself who have had some sort of rare neuroimmune diagnosis who can just talk to you about your experience and share information, whatever kind of support you might need. So we're here. SRNA is here, and we're ready to help you kind of learn what your new normal is.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I just wanted to pop back on really quick and give the biggest thank you to our special guests, Kris and Cyrena, for opening their hearts and just sharing their time and stories with us today. It really does make such a big difference, and it really does help raise awareness. So thank you so much. And also a big thank you to our audience members, wherever you are joining us from, far and wide. Thank you so much for helping us kick off Rare Disease Day 2023.